All right, welcome back to today's episode of Is It Prophecy here on Israel National Radio, Root Sheva. And the show is syndicated as Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Messiah Hour with Ari Lewis and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is free to do so. Again, we're continuing the political landscape discussion with Shira Nussdorf and some of the interviews she got with some Knesset members and people running for office. So without further ado, here is Shira Nussdorf.
אם הייתי ראש ממשלה, הייתי עושה בדיוק מה שראש ממשלה עושה עכשיו, כי אנחנו לא יודעים את החישובים שלו, ואנחנו לא יודעים מה קורה שם במדינה, לכן זה מה שהייתי עושה.
And in English?
If I was Prime Minister of Israel, I would do exactly what the Prime Minister of Israel is doing now, because we, as common people, we don't know what he's thinking, we don't know what they're going through, we don't know what's going on over there. The media lies.
Hi, I'm with Aris Sheva and a couple of voters. What are your names, voters?
Melanie Paj.
I'm Andrew Vitelli.
Could you tell us what your party is about and why we should vote for you?
Well, Beit Yehudi represents Eretz Yisrael, La'am Yisrael, Lefi Torat Yisrael, and in English that would be the land of Israel, according to Torah values to all of Israeli people, even if they're not necessarily Orthodox. And we're the only party that says absolutely no to two-state solution. We believe that we need to build up Judah and Shomron, that they belong to us, that we have the right to build in all of Israel. And also on the church and state issues, or if you will, shul and state in Israel, we're the ones that are bridging the gap between the Orthodox side of things and the Zionistic secular side of things, being all-inclusive, and we don't want to see any kind of coercion in the laws here, or as little as possible. We are sticking to Torah values and traditional values, but we don't think that in order to be a good Jew, you necessarily have to be an Orthodox Jew. Just somebody who's close to their Judaism, and so many seculars have been turned off by the way the ultra-Orthodox have been ruling and leading the religious issues in Israel. We want to change that and make it more user-friendly for all sides of Israeli society.
No, I think that covered my question.
I have a question. If you are really so religious, can you make a bracha? And maybe you could teach them a bracha. It's Tu B'Shvat tomorrow. These are the 7 species of Israel. Do you know the brachas for the fruit?
I'm making borei pri ha'etz here.
That's right. Can you tell our listeners, what are you eating?
It's a raisin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz.
Amen.
But I don't like dates, so I'm not going to do dates.
Would you like raisins?
I don't know the bracha, but
Well, perhaps you could bridge the gap between religious and somebody who's not as knowledgeable as yourself. These are raisins for the 7 species. Tu B'Shvat starts tomorrow. And maybe you can help us with the bracha. Baruch.
Baruch.
Atah.
Adonai.
Eloheinu.
Melech.
Haolam.
Borei.
Pri. Ha'etz. Amen. Following up on what you were saying, a lot of people earlier within the year of last year, before, let's say, the 3 boys came out, were looking at the way that now Haredim are supposed to go into the military or the draft issue. Where does your party stand on the draft issue?
Well, we've always believed that you need to do both. You need to serve in the army and study Torah. That's why we've always supported programs like the Hesder or the preparatory yeshivot, mechinot. We want to see everybody doing both. We don't think anybody can shirk their responsibility when it comes to serving in the army, which is why Ayelet Shaked, the chairman of our faction, led the bill in the Knesset. She did such a good job that she was even commended behind the scenes, because they can't really say it out loud, but by the ultra-Orthodox leaders such as Gafni, who said that she did a very sensitive job in leading that bill. And truly, right now, it isn't even an issue of them being drafted immediately. It's 5 years down the road. It was more, at least for the interim, to bring them into the workplace. And that's one of the things we're very proud of. Our chairman, Naftali Bennett, as economics minister, did vocational training for Haredi women and for Arab women, by the way. The statistics for Haredi women, it's up by 300%. 300% more Haredi women are going out and working in the workplace because of the vocational training that we've given them.
That's amazing. And what about the concern that some people have that the army is less than a kosher environment for these yeshiva boys? How do we address that? Even if there is separate units, people say they're still subjected or exposed to things they wouldn't necessarily be subjected to in yeshiva. How would you address a mother or a father with these concerns?
I understand, and I myself was an Orthodox boy who went into the army, but I think that if the values of Achdut Yisrael, of bringing sides of Israeli society together, are just as important as keeping your boy in a holy atmosphere, then compromises have to be made on both sides. The army is going to have to cater to what ultra-Orthodox need in order to keep themselves comfortable at a good comfort level. On the other hand, the ultra-Orthodox are going to have to realize that they're not living in a pure world anymore. Most of Israeli society are secular. And in order to work together and not hate each other, which is what's happened in Israeli society, and that's also, I believe this religiously, I believe that we have a religious responsibility to work with each other instead of bridging or burning bridges between each other and widening the gap. So each side has to do its part in compromising.
What about the fact this week's Parsha is Parshas Yisro, in which Moshe Rabbeinu was talking about what makes a good leader? Are you familiar with Parshas Yisro, and do the people in your party have those qualities? If so, what are the qualities and who?
Well, definitely. I love the leaders in our party. Yitro was the leader who was not necessarily Jewish, but brought into, as Moshe's father-in-law, somebody who was very smart, proving to us that not only the Jews have the smarts, we can learn from any nation, and anybody who is doing the right thing and is value-based is somebody that can be learned from. And I love Naftali Bennett, Ayelet Shaked, Uri Ariel. I could go on and on. Uri Orbach, may he have a speedy recovery because he's sick now. These are people who have proven themselves over the past 2 years of getting what all of Israeli society needs, not necessarily Orthodox side of society, all of Israeli society, truly bringing bridging the gaps between the different sides of Israeli society with true leadership based on Torah values.
Yasher Koach, on a personal level and off the record, I really hope that you do well, that Hashem should bless you, that the government should be a Torah government. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael. We spoke earlier, and I wanted to ask you again, as somebody who was talking about being an Olei Chadasha, the French situation, do you think there's going to be a wave of French immigration coming because of the situation?
There is a wave of French.
And there is no nefesh b'nefesh for French people. What should we do about that?
Maybe we should think about having a nefesh b'nefesh for French people, but no, there is a wave coming. I think that the French government, like all sovereign governments, has a responsibility to protect its people, but Israel, as a Jewish and Zionist state, should welcome all people who are interested in moving here, so Jewish people who are interested in moving here, certainly.
Thank you very much.
This must be changed, and we support Jewish pluralism to all Jewish streams and, of course, to secular people, so that the state is only responsible for the way you get signed up, for marriage, but you choose your religious way in freedom of choice.
But if that would be the case, so I guess the danger would be halachically if people were getting married and it wasn't halachic, and then women and men were getting married, so what if the babies were not halachically Jewish? What would be your response to that?
If someone wants to get married by halacha, they're more than welcome to do so. The question is, why do I, as a secular woman, or why do someone here as reform woman or man, must take their own rules if I don't hold them, I don't believe in them? I live in a democratic state. This is not an halacha state. And I don't think that the very narrow Orthodox stream should impose its values over the majority of Jewish people in Israel.
So I guess my question is regarding Jewish identity. If someone is born and their father is Jewish and their mother is not Jewish, then by halachic standards they're not Jewish, but Israel itself recognizes them as Jewish.
Exactly. The law of return, which promises the Jewish identity and the fact that Israel is the homeland for the Jewish people, recognizes many kinds of... this law does not follow halachic law. I don't see why the monopoly should be given to someone who actually forces halachic law over people who don't believe in that and don't want and don't choose to live their lives by halachic law. If you heard very shortly, halachic law is not relevant to most of us, and I don't see why we should get married and divorced by it.
Are there any other issues that you think the state currently has that are unfair towards secular Jews, and if so, what would you do about them?
Of course, I think the first and foremost topic is operating public transportation on Saturdays and holidays, which creates not only discrimination against secular, but also great injustice to all those who don't own a private car, and it actually prevents us from developing a just and effective public transportation like any other country in the world. I think these are the main issues that should be changed very, very quickly.
After the attack in Har Nof, many people said that we should no longer have maybe Arab people working in synagogues or someplace or nearby. One of the things that I did over the last few days was asking people, if you were prime minister, what would you do? And
my name is Rachel, and I'm from New York, and if I was a prime minister, I would hire only Jewish workers, at least for all public places and governmental offices.
And one person said she thinks that in city official buildings there shouldn't be Arabs if there's a threat of terrorism. What would be your thoughts on that?
I think this is, it's very sad to hear that. I think we shouldn't judge people by their race or by their nationality. I can understand the fear. It's very human, it's natural, but we shouldn't give in to racist thoughts just because we are afraid, and we are afraid, and we should do anything we can to fight terrorism. The way to do it is to pursue a very persistent way to peace and to a diplomatic and political settlements, arrangements, rather than close ourselves in fear and threats and racism.
One of the questions brought up yet not answered was the issue with the Sudani people. Would you like to comment on that? What do you think we should do with these Sudani people?
I think that Israel should develop a very clear and coherent immigration policy. Israel should take part in the global Western effort to give asylum to refugees and check their refugee requests and decide who is a refugee that is entitled to Israeli asylum and who is not. And as long as Israel does not do that, we see a total chaos. People are prevented from being deported, but on the other hand, they're prevented from working here. So of course that creates crime and poverty, and things are getting out of control. And I think the reason is lack of policy from the Israeli government.
Now, you talked about not imposing, let's say, the bus regulations on people who may or may not be secular. Tomorrow is Tu B'Shvat, so I wanted to invite you. As a new Olei Chadesha, I appreciate the country.
This is Tamar. This is my name.
Yes.
So thank you.
You know, halakhically, I opened them and checked them to make sure there weren't any worms, and I put an almond in there. So
that's so kind of you.
Thank you, Tamar. I really appreciate it. Would it be imposing if I asked you, do you know the bracha for that?
I'm secular. I'm sorry.
If I had one with you and said the bracha, would that be imposing?
Yeah,
that's so nice of you. It's ha'etz.
Okay.
So Tamar, it's so nice. The meeting of two worlds. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri ha'etz.
See such poor results, and now the question before us is whether we should continue another violent round after the other, and they keep being more and more frequent, or we should change policy and choose a different way.
Tamar, I don't think we should, want to be loved around the world. We should be right, and we should explain that we are right, and we should fight the delegitimation and not to give up on our truth in order to be loved.
We can try and explain our mistakes, or we can try and fix them. It's better.
Or you could do both. The state of Israel today has to be proactive in changing the situation in Judea and Samaria, but we also have to defend ourselves. And we have to defend ourselves against charges that are baseless, that we're an apartheid state. Today, the state of Israel devotes less money to defending itself internationally than does the state of Norway. Right? No kidding. And it's not funny. And it is a strategic threat, the charge of being an apartheid state. We have to meet it. That's part of our responsibility, too.
Ayelet, the main reason that we are facing most of our troubles from the Gaza Strip is the fact that in Judea and Samaria, relatively, there is law and order. Relatively. And it's based on the cooperation between the security agencies of Israel and the Palestinian security agencies. It's not something for life, it's not very stable, but relatively to Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, there is a police, there is a relatively law and order, and that's the main reason.
Right, because they cooperate with the Israeli security forces.
I said it's one of the reasons, it's not the only one.
I just want one sentence to add it. First, I agree with you. You know,
Where is Tzachi?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm agreeing with you instead of Tzachi. You see, I'm doing his job. But really, I was one of the major activists of the Labour Party, as a major activist, who objected to this engagement. You know what? Not that because I think we have something to do in Gaza. Because I don't want to give anything to the Palestinians for free. I want that if we will give 1 inch of Israeli or Jewish soil, and by the way, I don't have an argument with you as for whose this land belongs to. Biblically, historically, morally, it's belonged to the Jewish people. The question is, no, definitely, I agree with you. Not everyone in the left or far left. But the Labour Party, or the Zionist camp, or Junior, or whatever, right now, always advocated for an end of all claim agreement. I want to know that if I'm leaving Gaza, and I'm leaving few parts of Judea and Samaria, it will be end of all claim. I want the responsibility to be of the Palestinian state. I don't want to be responsible for 2.5 million Palestinians. And believe me, definitely, and believe me, if they will make terror after that, and by the way, you know, there was crazy, I don't remember because I was too young, but I remember that also Menachem Begin had Danny Danons and Ayelet Shaked in the coalition, and they told him, listen Menachem, you will never reach peace with Egypt. And if you will reach it, it will be break. You cannot trust the Arab. And you know what? He was leader enough to reach it. And you know what? It didn't break even under Muhammad Mursi, who was from the Muslim Brotherhood. Which means that if you have a leadership strong enough, knows what's good for the future of the Zionist states, you can and you have to make peace. And you know what? A brave leadership don't manage a conflict. A brave leadership bring peace.
I think that, I just think you live in a dream because there is no Palestinian leader that can really, you know, it's not like in Egypt that they have a state and everything. There is no Palestinian leader who can,
there is an Israeli leader. There is an Israeli leader.
Who can back it.
There is no Palestinian, but there is an Israeli one.
I live in the Middle East. I don't live in the dream. And I think that in the Middle East, in the situation that we are surrounded, the radical Islamic jihad and all the countries are being collapsed, I'm not crazy to give even 1 centimeter to the Arabs.
Are you South African?
Yeah, well.
Are you South African? One thing we heard repetitively was this word apartheid. And you, coming from South Africa, could you maybe comment on the difference between Israel and South Africa and what does it mean to live in an apartheid state, and is Israel an apartheid state based on your experience?
Okay, Israel is not an apartheid state in terms of the internal democracy of Israel, but there is an enormous danger that there are 4.5 million people who are living in very close proximity to Israel and very much intertwined with Israel that do not have the same rights that the people inside Israel have. So in that sense, there is a danger that if that issue isn't solved, that it becomes a situation where there are people living more or less in the same area who have different levels of rights. And that's apartheid. 2 systems of laws for the same area, for the same people, and obviously this is why the notion that Baita Yehudi is putting forward of annexing more territory and giving those 70,000 people who live there full rights and the people who live in areas A and B not, this becomes an extremely controversial and difficult issue where you can't go on and on and on saying it's not apartheid, when in fact there are people who don't have basic human rights.
One of the questions I think a woman asked was, what can we learn from Europe? Were you in South Africa when they broke down the apartheid state? And could you give us some advice about what you think we should do?
Yes, I was in South Africa, and South Africa, people have a perception that it was the sanctions that broke South Africa, and it was one arm of the mechanism that broke down apartheid, but what really broke apartheid was the civil disobedience, what was happening inside. It basically became ungovernable. People had nothing to lose, and they were prepared to go out into the street and create, not work, strike, and create civil disobedience, and that's what happened, and that's really what broke apartheid. And when you see people in Gaza saying they have nothing to lose, they will fight until the death, they will be killed in their homes if that's what it takes. It reminds me of that, where people have nothing to lose, the enormous threat of violence. But of course in South Africa we had a leader who was extremely committed to a non-violent solution. Two leaders, in fact, and that made all the difference, and that's what we need here.
So do you support a two-state solution, or what would it be as you would have it?
The other thing that I was very impressed with was Yaakov Perry talking about a regional initiative, which I think the Arab Peace Initiative has been on the table for 12 years. It's been ignored. I think this is the time when the Arab world is very much divided into extremists and into the center and the moderate voices, to grab that by the horns. And I do believe in a two-state solution. I know that it's not a simple, let's do it issue, but I think that the API is an amazing starting point.
You talked about one of the breaking points in South Africa was that the people themselves just said they would come to the streets, they would do it. Would you compare that initiative to the terrorist actions that we see here in Tel Aviv, people stabbing on the bus, Har Nof? Is there any comparison?
No, because in South Africa, it was very, very rare for ordinary civilians to be targeted. It was much more about breaking the economic back of apartheid, which was more about strikes. It was more about economic action by the miners, by the workers. And here it's a different issue. Civilians were not targeted in the sense of blow up and kill as many people as possible. There was never that policy in South Africa. If civilians were hurt in bomb attacks, which there were some but few, it was always regretted by the ANC leadership. It wasn't their main policy.